In today's episode, we're going to talk about learning how to fast, because anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you can do it well. The thing about intermittent fasting is that fasting is a skill, and it's a skill that is unfamiliar, I would say, to most of us Americans. It is not a part of our culture. We tend to, as a people, we eat breakfast. Breakfast is the most important part of the day. That's what we're told in school. We have lunch, we have snacks, we have supper, we have, we watch TV and eat food. And so we're constantly eating. And the concept of fasting, of not eating for an extended period of time, even if that's, just simply not eating breakfast, it's a foreign concept. And since it's just so different than what we're used to, it just takes learning how to do it. It's, kind of awkward at first. There are things you have to learn, and you've been practicing a totally different kind of way of eating for probably your entire life. So you have to learn how to do this. And if you can just go into this process with the attitude and the belief that you can learn how to fast, that you can even learn how to get good at fasting, but it's just going to take some time, that's really going to help you. If you go into it with the mindset that basically you're just born knowing how to do this, so if you're bad at it, then you should just quit, you're probably going to fail, and that won't be good. But this is a skill. It's just something you can learn how to do. For me personally, I was not like this natural faster. Obviously, I was just eating all the time. When I was obese, I would wake up, I would eat, I would snack throughout the morning, I would eat lunch, I would snack throughout the afternoon, I would eat supper, I would snack and, in front of the television. That's just what I did. It was just not a thing where I just naturally went long periods of time without eating. And I think it's really helpful to think of fasting as a practice. The key word being practice, meaning you're not going to be at all perfect at first, and there's going to be a learning curve. Eventually, with practice, it does get easier. In the beginning, I remember, there were times where I was hungry and I was like, oh, this is difficult. Or, I would be watching the clock, like, oh, when's 2:00 going to get here? Because that's when my window would open up. Things like that do happen. At the same time, you should expect that your journey is going to look different than another person's. Your journey is going to look different than mine. There is a level of individuality with fasting. I've talked to plenty of people about their fasting methods and what has worked for them, what has not worked for them. Just understand that that's going to be a part of the learning process. Is how does your own body deal with fasting? What kind of window looks good for you and what is not good. And if you'll just be patient with yourself and let yourself experiment and not, try to have that perfectionist mindset or get into the mindset of you've got to go longer and longer and longer. If you can just say, I've got to find what works for me, I'm going to learn that, you're going to be much better off. And you're going to have much better results, because if you can just focus on what actually works for you, what you feel good at, and what fits comfortably in your life, that's going to give you the long-term results. Forcing things and just trying to white knuckle it, that's only going to lead to quitting. Now, a big part of learning how to fast is learning how to deal with yourself in the fasting window, because you're going to mess up is the thing. You're going to inevitably have a day where, maybe the fasting, is pretty easy at first, but then you're just going to pop a bite of food in your mouth without thinking about it, and you're going to have eaten that bite before you even know what happened. And then you are likely going to be kind of thinking, what am I supposed to do now? Now, you may find yourself in this mindset of oh, I messed up and now it's ruined, But what I have found in those situations, when you find a place where you messed up, you didn't do it perfectly, the best thing you can do is just quickly move on from it. Learn something and move on. Just say, okay, in the future, I need to be more mindful about how often am I doing that? I was surprised at how often I would just grab, little bites of food here and there. Because I was fasting, then I would, put it back down. But I was definitely in the habit of cleaning up my kids' plates, because I had little kids. So, they'd leave a bite of a sandwich, a bite of, a bagel, and it would drive me nuts. And, what I realized though, when I started fasting was wow, I would just be popping stuff in my mouth constantly, not understanding that, that was all those calories were adding up. So once I started fasting, I became more self-aware, but it was a process. It was learning I'm picking up this bite of food, but I'm not going to eat it right now because I'm fasting. Now, sometimes you actually might find yourself though, eating on purpose. Maybe you set out to do, say, a 16-8 and you made it to hour 14 and you just couldn't take it anymore and you ate. So what do you do? Well, it's a learning experience. And a thing you can learn from that experience is not that you have no self-control, and it's not that, you're going to fail at this. What you can learn is, oh, maybe your window was a little too aggressive for where you're at right now with your fasting. You just need to learn how to be consistent with a shorter window first. So in other words, like if right now, you find yourself like maybe your goal is to get to a 16:8, but you keep breaking it around the 14-hour mark. Well, just let that be your window for now. Just do a 14:10 and be consistent with that for a few weeks. Just let yourself do that for a few weeks. And then if you feel ready, then push it out a little bit. But the idea that you've got to jump into a window, that's a big mistake, I think. I know there are some people who can do it. And if you're one of those people, great, go ahead, do it, whatever works for you. But if you find yourself just struggling against that, like it's a too aggressive window, back it off a little bit. You also have to learn how to tell yourself no. In the fasting window, you're gonna, from time to time, even, when you're doing a good job of eating the right amount of food, you're probably going to feel hungry from time to time, because hunger, it's a funny thing. It sometimes is really because you're hungry, but a lot of times it's because you're bored or because you're emotional right now, or just because of habit. And you have to learn how to tell yourself no, like, not yet. We're not going to eat just yet. We're going to wait. So you got to go get busy doing something else right now, and then wait until the window opens up. But the cool thing is, once you learn how to tell yourself no, you can start to tell other people no, which a lot of people who have weight problems have issues with. They have a hard time telling people no. They kind of tend to people please and that kind of thing, which can lead to resentment, which is certainly something I dealt with. And so it's good to learn how to tell yourself no in the fasting window. And you have to also learn how to eat the right amount of food, which again, is a skill. You have to learn this. You won't know right off the bat how much food you should eat during that window in order to, hit that right balance of you're losing weight and you're still able to feel good and, function well in the fasting window. It's about learning that sweet spot. And plus, you have to remember there's all these different foods that you're going to be eating. So it's not just like you learn how to eat one meal and that's just it. It's, every day is probably going to be something a little bit new. And so it's just a process. You learn how to eat the right amount, but it takes time. It takes time to learn these things. And you have to just be patient with yourself, be patient with the scale, and just trust the process. And it's really simple. If the scale's moving up, you're eating too much food. If the scale is staying stuck, you're eating the right amount to maintain where you're at. And if the scale is moving down, then you're eating the right amount of food in order to lose weight. If you're finding yourself feeling terrible in the fasting window, though, you're probably eating too little food and you need to increase it a little bit. But again, it's a learning process. And when you're learning how to fast, you'll also find that you're becoming more aware of your inner dialogue, of your own actions, because you can't do that thing that you used to do, which for us with a weight problem, usually we used to go eat. And you start to confront things that maybe before you kind of were using food to kind of not think about. So, it might be, stressful situations. It might be just past things. A lot of people have, trauma. I didn't necessarily have any trauma, but I did have stuff that I was holding on to from the past, things about my weight, just different upsetting things that I would remember about, being made fun of, that kind of thing. All that can kind of come to the surface when you're fasting. And so, it's uncomfortable, but you have to learn how to deal with that stuff. You have to learn how to work through it, do something more constructive with your time. Like if you find that you're upset and normally you would eat, you have to say, well, what else could I do? Because I'm not going to eat. So what am I going to do? Maybe there's some sort of action you can take, or maybe there's nothing you can do about the situation. And if that's the case, you can go for a walk. You can talk to somebody about it. There are ways to deal with it other than eating. You just have to be willing to try something different. But there's also another piece to the puzzle, which is learning how to fast around other people. The odds are you are around other people during your fasting window. Maybe you go to work and so you're in an office or something like that. Or maybe you just have people that you live with and so they're eating and you're not. I personally am a stay-at-home mom, and I had young kids when I was first starting out on this journey. And so for me, fasting was really pretty easy as far as I didn't have to deal very much with other people trying to get me to eat or, being in kind of awkward situations. But you will eventually find that people will, interrupt your fasting window for various reasons. And it's up to you to learn how to deal with those things because it will happen. You can always just tell people, no, I'm not eating right now. That's a pretty simple way to do it. My own tactic has been to just eat with people. If they want me to eat with them, I'm going to eat with them. And I've always looked at it from the perspective of intermittent fasting for me is a tool. It's a tool to help me lose weight. It's also a tool to help me maintain my weight loss. But my identity is not wrapped up in being an intermittent faster. What's much more important to me is the relationships I have with the people around me. So if at any point I felt like fasting was like causing some sort of, problem there, then I would need to change that. So far it has not. I have had to learn how to, not always do OMAD. Though what I found was as my kids got older, there were more times where they would just ask me like, hey, can you have lunch with me? Hey, well, you know what, you want to have, breakfast with me? Or, my youngest son would like actually make breakfast for me. It was so sweet. And of course I'm going to eat. I'm just going to do that. And my thought was always, well, I can learn how to do this too. I know that OMAD works, but I also know that other forms of intermittent fasting work. And I know ultimately it's not magic. Plenty of people maintain a perfectly healthy weight doing no intermittent fasting at all. So my attitude has always been, I'm going to do this in a way that fits in my life. So if that means, there are days where I don't do the intermittent fasting plan I had set out for myself because there's some sort of surprise, I'm going to be okay with that. Like, the other day, my mother-in-law brought over donuts and I love that woman because she brought me donuts. Now, I love her anyway, but the point is she brought donuts and there are lots of different ways that are perfectly acceptable to handle that. But for me personally, the way I have handled it throughout this entire journey from when I was trying to lose weight and when I was just maintaining, I've always just been of the opinion that's like, this is more important. This one day, this one opportunity to, be in fellowship with this other human being is more important than me, sticking to OMAD today. Again, you do have to balance that because if you're the type of person who has people over all the time. I'm an introvert. I don't have people over very often. I like my privacy. I really like to be at home reading a lot. I don't go out that often, but that's my life. So if you have a more kind of social life, you may need to, figure out some different ways of dealing with other people in your fasting window. But the main point is to figure out what fits best in your life and just learning how to do that, learning how to fit intermittent fasting into your life instead of doing it the other way, which some people do. And I think that's when people have a hard time is when they try to make their lives fit into intermittent fasting. But if you just flip it around and say, okay, this is my life. Now, how can I fit intermittent fasting into it? I think you'll find that it's just sustainable and that you'll have an easier time because you are being realistic and it's something that can permanently work. And it's important to keep that learning mindset too. So, when you're in the beginning, you're just learning how to fast. And then, even in maintenance, you're going to have to learn how to do this and still maintain. You might want to change your rules up a little bit because maybe you want to ease off a little bit. Maybe you want a longer eating window. That's just another opportunity to learn. Or maybe your life will change in some way. Maybe you're still going to be trying to lose weight, but then, for whatever reason, the thing that you were doing, maybe you were doing OMAD and, maybe for some reason that doesn't really work in your life because you have some sort of life change, then it's okay. You can just figure out how to do it. It's all about just keeping the mindset that you can learn how to achieve your goals with fasting. And it just sometimes takes a little bit of tweaking. So remember, intermittent fasting is a practice. It's something that you're probably never going to be perfect at. I certainly am not perfect at it. I have had times, even, after doing this for like 8 years now, I still have had times where I'll pop a bite of food in my mouth, just not thinking about it because, I'm like, oh yeah, right. I was fasting. So don't worry about that. It's no big deal. You can still get to your goals. The main thing is just to keep the proper learning mindset. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Do you want to lose the weight without getting rid of the foods you love and that you'll go back to eating again anyway? My book, The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting, teaches you how to practice intermittent fasting so that you lose the weight sustainably and keep it off for good. You can get the audiobook read by me for free when you sign up for your 30-day trial of Audible. The link is in the show notes. And if you've gotten value from this podcast and you'd like to let other people know about it, it would be great if you could leave a review on either iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks.